What is going on, investors? Back again. Time to talk about PayPal, ticker symbol PYPL, just reported earnings after the bell today. We see during the regular session up just fractionally about 1%, but we're giving it all back in more in the after hours, selling off nicely 6% after reporting, actually good earnings, but lighter than expected guidance into the next quarter, the fourth quarter. They're expecting a 41% growth rate on their EPS, which I guess the street was expecting a little bit higher. So all things being considered, it was a good quarter from a revenue and profit perspective. We'll jump into the numbers and we'll take a look at what's going on here. And then finally, we'll jump into the stock chart. This thing's pulling back into a zone that we kind of like. So we'll take a look at PayPal. Full disclosure, I have a handful of shares of PayPal, only a couple. It's not really a big deal for me. It definitely won't affect how I analyze what we've got going on here. So PayPal just reported September 30th quarter. We got 19 over 20 here. We've got our 9-month ended here, 19 over 20. They're about to get into their fourth quarter like most companies are. So we've got net revenues here up at the top. We went from we'll call that 4.4 up to 5.5. That is a solid number on the top line. We see it holds true about for the 9-month as well. We're up about 3 billion, which is about, a billion a quarter, which is what they added to the top line in the most recent quarter as well. Transaction expense is not like a major high margin business. I mean, it's like borderline. We obviously see software companies run at a much higher margin. This is a pretty high margin business. You spent 2 billion to make 5.5, and then you spent 1.7 to make 4.4 in the previous period. I take this back. This is a pretty high margin business. You spent 5.6 to make 15.4. Those are juicy margins. So everything looking pretty good. Actually, the expense in the most recent quarter is pretty high because if you annualize this out or 9-month this out, this is actually 6 billion. It's actually a shade over 6 billion. And you see for the 9 months, they came in at 5.6. So something about this quarter, their transaction expense was a little bit higher than it has been trending in the last 9 months. It'll be interesting to see in the next quarter and the subsequent quarter if that holds true or not. We've got transaction and credit losses. This is interesting just from a macro perspective to see how people, if consumers out there are losing or are taking more credit losses on their account. And it looks just year over year, not really. For the 9-month, we actually see a tick up, not like a massive increase, but actually a pretty significant increase, but the most recent quarter, not so much. We went from 340 up to 344. That's pretty much a rounding error there. So customer support went up, sales and marketing went up, all these costs went up, obviously, as our revenues went up. And so that gives us a operating income down here at 977, just a shade under $1 billion. That compares favorably to the previous period where we did 700 million. Now, taking a look at the 9-month, we did 2.3 billion in operating income and 1.9. Let's give them credit for another billion in the fourth quarter. That would give us about $3.3 billion, $220 billion market cap. So that's an astronomical PE in the 90 range. So just something to keep in mind. PayPal, not necessarily from a valuation perspective, a cheap stock, but it's certainly growing into that valuation as we see these numbers are growing. I'll show you more evidence here of that in a minute. So we had a little bit of other income. We've got some net income here. We've got an earning per share. This stock does not pay a dividend. You'd like for at some point for PayPal to kind of morph into that. I think that would be a good thing. So that would be, in my opinion, that's something that these companies, these fintech companies, will have to morph into as their growth rate slows down. I want to show you just kind of like a month over month view of their transaction revenues and active accounts and things like that. So here's some other 3-month data. So they give you September. They basically give you a quarter over quarter. So, about a year ago, we had 295 million active accounts, and now we've up to 361. So it's showing you that we're still in growth mode in terms of active accounts. Number of transaction you also expect would tick up. It has. That is nice. Total payment volume. This is a big one. We obviously see this is it decelerated a little bit in the March quarter. I think that's kind of expected given everything that was going on, and we see a reacceleration of that as well. So those are the kind of things that you want to keep in mind with PayPal. As long as this payment volume is accelerating, as long as the active account is accelerating, and then when we take a look at the cost structure and things like that, as long as these costs stay in line, these transaction expenses stay in line, and we're clearing this $1 billion net income, that would be a positive for the stock. You see, we cleared $1 billion in just the most recent quarter. For 9 months, we've cleared $2.6 billion. So it was a fantastic quarter from an operating income perspective and a net income perspective. We'll see if that is able to continue in future quarters for PayPal. Let's jump over the stock chart. We'll make this a long video. So we've kind of come up here. We've made several tops, and this high is actually a little bit higher than that. So that's not necessarily a bearish sign. We're kind of chopping around in this box up to about, we'll call it 208, and then we could come back down here and retest 170. We're sitting right here at 175, right where my cursor is, actually right in the middle of a range where I like this, at least from a chart perspective. Again, from a valuation perspective, it is a little stretched, but as long as they continue their growth, they'll likely grow into this valuation at some point, although it will take a little while to bring those price to earnings ratios down into a range where more investors will be comfortable. We're actually sitting right, you could even draw a trend line right in the middle of this one, and I think you could squeeze that one in right there, and we're kind of right on that, okay? So we're right in there. If you want to add a share or two to your PayPal account, or if you want to, start a position, whatever it is, I wouldn't really mind it right here. Again, from a chart perspective, this stock did bottom out here and then rallied hard to a new high. And we see the stock kind of chopped around this range and then rallied up to a high, and then again did the same thing here. So will it repeat that? That'll be interesting. Now, this 170, if you want to be safe, this 170 mark, in my opinion, is a line in the sand. There's not a lot. If you zoom this chart out, in fact, what we should do is maybe change this to like a monthly chart and kind of see there is nothing underneath this. I mean, if you break this 170 mark, you're probably coming down to 150, 155. That's kind of the next stop in the elevator. So, and then, I mean, you could, if a really bearish case, you could come all the way down here to 115, 120. So there'd be other stops along the way there, but that to me, in my opinion, is where I would play PayPal. I think you just want to keep in mind that, we're at a critical level here, right at around 175. I don't mind you stepping in. If you're somebody that likes to be conservative, I would put a stop loss probably at the 169, 169 and a half, because if this stock breaks that, the likelihood of it falling down to the 160, 150 range is probably rather high, because this 170 range acted as pretty good key levels of support, and we didn't test it here. So it'll be interesting if it tests it here. If it does test the 170 mark, I would inch into a share, and again, I would have a stop loss underneath it if that is something that precludes you. So there we go. That was PayPal Holdings down in the after hours, moving into a range where technically it looks like it could potentially be a buy. We'll see if they were sandbagging on their guidance or if they can come in strong on Q4 and ride this stock back up. That was PayPal. We'll be back again soon. Good luck with your investments.